I can't think of the word I was trying to think of.
Oops, lighting is not doing me no justice. There we
All
go.
right, there we go. I couldn't think of how to spell granite, so like take things for granted. So I just had to change the word for
Granted, yeah.
I was having one of those brain friends. All right, so I have the questions up, but this is an interview, so I'm letting you take the lead.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for interviewing with me, first of all. Really appreciate it. So, just to go more in depth about what I'm writing about, I'm writing a piece about Black women and women of color in workspaces and, what they kind of like faced, who were their mentors, and how they kind of navigated their work life, Especially just this kind of inspired me because of my mother and her stories as a Black woman and having her master's and her being kind of in a manager position for about 30 years, but the steps it took to get to that manager position when someone, of, a lighter
Mediocre.
skin complexion could get it in a much shorter time with the same degree. So that's what kind of inspired me for this story. And then I just started thinking about like Black women that I see that are constantly working and, in these spaces and how they operate. And I see the way you interact in the office. And first of all, I love it. And I love the
Oh,
energy
thank
that you
you.
bring to the office. Yes, like the past 3 years I worked there, I'm just like, she really is a vibe, and so I'm sorry. I mean, I'm not at work right now, so I can say you a vibe. But yeah, I
Oh
just
no, and I
really,
tony get it.
you really inspired
Trust me,
me
look,
and the
I'm
other
for the
girls at
culture,
the
so
front. Yeah, me too. That's why I had to bring you in here. So yeah, that's just a little bit about the story, and let me ask the questions now. I feel like you already prepped though. I could tell.
oh I don't need to prep. I already have it.
Oh, period. Okay.
Sorry, that's a little. We'll
No,
talk about confidence.
no, we got it, we got it. So the first question is, do you think our company, our workspace celebrates diverse ideas and people?
Separate ideas and people.
Um,
Um, well, no, I'm telling you,
oh, you
I'm
separate.
separating
Okay.
um, because that's a complex answer.
Mm,
Um, and if I'm being candid, diverse ideas more so. I do think that we are a growing um, place that always are interested in people's ideas.
mm-hmm.
Um, and as an institution, that if you go on our website, we pride ourselves to being a high Latinx community. I do think that we celebrate diversity to an extent.
Mm,
Um, and I don't like to have the separation mindset, but you also can't lump every person who is a person of color into one category.
I agree.
And so if you look at the statistics, we are one of the leading places in Texas for Hispanic Americans. But if we took that number out of perspective and we think just as Black people and retention rate for African American, both men and women, also the number of population, we still only have 14%.
Mm,
And so if we're looking at that number comparative, that is similar to a primary white institution instead of comparative to like a HBCU. Um, and I do think that we lean more on the aspect of celebrating other diversities.
ooh.
I'm keeping that as easy as possible.
Yeah, yeah. So then my next question for you is, what are your biggest obstacles, like as a Black woman, that you had to confront as you had to like advance into your role? Do you think what was the biggest like
This part
obstacle?
was just in general.
In general, like what do you feel?
So in life in general,
Mm-hmm.
because you've probably heard the saying, Black people have to work twice as hard to get half as much.
Mm-hmm.
So we're always saying like, we have to be the strong Black woman. Basically saying that we always have to earn our worth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and a big thing And yes, you do have to show that you're valuable to a company. And this is just my perspective. Is, I don't speak for every person in the Black community. But I think there's a difference between showing value in the company, like what makes you a qualified candidate, and also trying to make yourself, to show that you're worthy of being in the position.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I meet the skills and qualifications, and I like to say, and comparative to someone who could be mediocre, a mediocre white male, specifically,
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna spend, like, and if I'm working and doing the thing that I'm supposed to be doing, getting the degrees,
Mm-hmm.
and doing what I'm supposed to do, I do expect the same salary. So settling for less, doing the same position, I'm like, that's not something that I want to do, because there is a wage gap between women of color, comparative to white counterparts. There's a difference between women and men, and so there's those discrepancies. So I look at the job, and we know sometimes education does not like to pay well. So I'm like, if you're already not going to pay well, I don't need to even pay you worse. To be honest, and I do feel like I make a decent salary comparative to people. Actually, I probably make a better salary, better comparative to people who are in this same sport. But I'm like, I'm showing you my value and my skills, which you can also see on a resume. But I'm not going to grovel to show you my worth, because if you hired me, you should expect that.
You're going to come with it.
I'm going to do the job, and I'm doing it. And so, and if I'm not doing something, help me.
I like that answer.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense, because I feel like, especially with like the wage gap, there is, like, they'll try to give you, lowball you for some work that could be done for much more. And I just had a discussion like that with one of my interns, and they were like, yeah, like, that I heard so-and-so is making this much money. And, salary is kind of a touchy subject, especially too, because, when you say salary, people are like, oh, like, it's a lot. But I mean, you got to get paid for what you're worth and more.
And I want to say, we said, and you kind of froze, just let you know, but you said salary is a touchy subject. Why?
Because
is the thing that I ask myself. Why should it be touchy? Because it wants to be a secret, because people don't want to pay you what you're worth?
I think that's it.
So, I look up salaries, and I do the research, and I look what's comparable, and then I always try to ask for a little bit more. It's kind of like when you're negotiating, and I negotiate so many things. I negotiate my apartment lease. If they're asking me for a renewal, if you're begging me, what's keeping me here? Like, this is going to sound so horrible, so let me say this first, the complete thing before you judge it. Sometimes in my brain, I have to think, okay, what would a Becky say, but say it in a way that's not Becky-ish.
Yeah.
Because they're still holding a standard. So understanding your worth, being able to articulate that worth, because people who look different than us, and I'm using white male example, they never have that worth conversation. They already know and we don't necessarily know. And people can see that.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely a given. Like, you have to sit here and ponder, oh my gosh, I wonder what I'm going to make, instead of I already know I'm going to get it. Because, it's that low ball, especially towards women and Black women. And I can just tell you from experience this summer, and realizing that I really don't speak on wage like that, because it's made me kind of uncomfortable whenever people tell me theirs, and I'm like, ooh, it's very touchy.
But the thing is, if you're asking a job, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. And so, I don't know if you've seen this TikToking that's I'm using. But and she was like, be delusional. And so,
I saw that one.
And it was, and so I'm like, that makes so much sense, because most times we always have to think reasonably. But my reasonable and someone else's reasonable, because they don't understand the traumas of being Black, their reasonable is also a higher standard. So be delusional. All they can say is no. They're not going to laugh in your face. What, they're going to cuss you out?
Right.
They're going to say, unfortunately, they're going to say that's something that we cannot offer, and then you can take it or leave it, and be okay if you have to leave it. Like having a feeling that I'll be fine either way.
I agree.
Because people can see that, use it to your advantage.
Great. So my next question for you is: have you ever experienced inequality in the workplace? And I know this is kind of a little touchy question because it's like, you know, but not. It don't have to be ours, but it can be in general.
Oh no, I have one. I do have one. Not here. When I was a grad student, so personal. My grandfather had died.
Oh.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. He was 91. But I was working in housing, and students were just coming back from a winter break, and we've known, and from the prior semester, I guess these roommates just kept arguing over little petty things. They were freshmen, and so I was like, okay, typically your RA, who I am not, will do your roommate agreement, but since y'all can't get it together prior to my grandfather passing, I was like, I as the hall director and the other assistant director, we've known this to be true. She fired Black people like this. She already had told me that I don't understand my place at the institution, although I had been working there for quite a bit and went there at university. That comes into play. So we were going to do the experience, even though this typically the RA job, because we were going to help them out. I found out it was like 5 minutes before the meeting. I got a call, and they was like, your grandfather had passed. I was literally getting prepared. I started bawling in my office. Trauma. I went out and I was like, I was going to say her name, but we're going to keep it. I'm like, I'm sorry, I just found out my grandfather passed away. I can't do this meeting. She was like, well, you tell them why we have to cancel this meeting. She was like, you know the notes. I'm like, we write notes for a reason. If you wanted to, I wrote a detail, and our notes aren't just like in housing. You write books. I'm like, there's already books in the notes that details everything. Because she was like, I don't know the stuff that you know. I'm like, it's all in the details. I just told you my grandfather died. She's like, well, you have to tell them why we're canceling the meeting. I unfortunately did. I was like, and she was like, they were like, oh, I'm so sorry. We'll just meet with her. And they were totally understanding. But I don't know if you're religious, but this is the power of prayer. When I went back in, because I should have went to HR, but I was like, Lord, I've never asked anybody to get fired. I don't even want her to get fired, but she don't need to be working with Black people anymore. Send her to somewhere white that has a full. And this is truly, I was bawling. Nonetheless, because she was a person, like, she was so top, she was not leaving. No one would fire her, even though we had these claims. Her husband got a job in the city in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and when they told me this, I almost worked in front of her of joy. That is, but that was discrimination. And then the next person that came in after her became my mentor. And they were like, Khalilah, she was a Black woman, and she was like, all this person wrote was bad notes on you, but I clearly see that you're not like this. I wish I had more time with you, because I was, again, close to graduation. Because all she did was write notes, but clearly something is off. And because they gave me no training for the job at all. So, and then every time I brought up I didn't get any training, they told me to shut up, basically, in the more professional ways.
Wow.
So the place was a mess. But yeah, that's the moment. But my mentor helped me through it.
That's really cool. And I actually want to kind of skip to that question before we answer the fourth one. But like, why is mentorship like important to you? And like, who was your first mentor?
So I'm gonna go back to my mentor that I was talking. Was one of my main mentors in housing, and she took over the job as the assistant director. I also, during that time when we were looking for, I got the dean of the University of Student Affairs. She was also my mentor because she was also my supervisor because we were looking for other people. It was a mess, but I enjoyed working with both of them, and they're both references that I would use today because I learned so much and gained so much from them. But it's so important, not just for the connections that you meet. Who can say that, for one, that they have a dean of a university as a mentor?
Yeah.
Saying that we literally created places and things and innovated things. And I was able to work at the Intercultural Center because they had a director. And it was like, Khalilah, I want you to start doing this. And I created a whole system and wrote a strategic plan for the department. And I was like, who does this? But also, I learned professionalism from a Black woman's perspective. So having a Black woman who understands the identities. Because I came in, wasn't prepared for our first one-on-one meeting. She was like, why did you come in like this? I expect you to have questions. So I came in on time. I was ready. I didn't have a notebook because no one really. I thought it was just going to be all my other one-on-ones prior. They barely talked to me. They didn't really do it. So I just never came prepared. And so she was like, next time you come, I expect you to have questions. And so I started typing she was like, when she talked, she was like, I didn't need you to type the questions, but I was like, I typed my questions. I came prepared. She was like, yes, I'm glad I'm seeing this in you. And so I didn't know. And so sometimes you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. And when you have someone in the field, especially someone who has your perspective, they can say, this is what the field is like and how it's treating and how we have to work to be better. Because I say, when you know better, and I got this phrase from her: when you know better, you do better. So that's why mentorship is important.
I love that. And also, I think a good mentor too, they teach you how to keep a paper trail of things, or just keep a trail. So when you forget something, I always keep emails. Yes, me too. And I always keep notes of like tasks I complete. And I just got out of a call with this one person. I think I really want her to be my mentor too. But she they all are organized. They organize everything like ridiculously. So I think that's a good thing that she taught you, how to just keep track and come with questions, because you ain't gonna learn nothing if you closed mouths don't get fed at the end of the day.
And I want to use this perspective, even how I told you, I was like, instead of you saying, you emailed me, messaged me these, I was like, this is, and in my brain I was like, this is not the way you answer. Like, you asked, would you like something? And so when I was saying, because I could have typed these questions, I really could have.
I know, and I know I wasn't doing it the right way. I was just in a rush. So I literally was like, I need to connect with them. I need to look on their calendars and go, you are free at 3 on this day. Let's connect with these questions, because ain't no way you're going to answer 10 questions and type it out. That's an essay.
So I was like, that's why I responded. I'm like, I'm not shutting you down. Like, I want you to come correct, because as a person, I'm like, I know that you know this, and when you know better, you do better. It says we only have 5 minutes in this meeting, but I don't have another appointment, so I'm good.
I'm good too.
Next question. Yeah. I think that was the next question.
Yeah, so I think the next question is, when you began your career, did you ever think about like your race being like a factor, or you being a Black woman would be kind of a factor in your job role?
Absolutely. I don't think there's a way that you cannot think of that. Uh, Even when picking location, because I am from Michigan. Excuse me. I am from places. Uh, when they say Saginaw, Detroit, Flint is all the same. Uh, Black parts of Michigan. If you go to the Upper Peninsula or on the west side of the state, it's not so. But I'm like, I want to be around places that have people who look like me. And so even thinking about factors of where am I going to live? Are because it's not just work, but it's like it's the community that I'm creating. Am I going to see people? Am I going to be able to build a community? If I walk down, most of the time, what people call safe communities that have Black people, that scares me sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, well, if someone saw me walking down the street, would they call the police? Like, would something happen? And just that, unfortunately, and if you, and the United States is most people, if you do I was like looking at surveys, most people don't want to come here because of race. Outside of the United States, and like most other countries, although they have race problems, you have it the worst.
Yeah.
So I have to think about it, but I also don't let it stop me, because if I only went to places that had a majority of Black people, that's called redlining. I'm not going to be redlined, so I have to find what's the balance.
Yeah, it's kind of hard finding that balance too as a Black woman, I feel like, because it's just like, and I've kind of learned too in like corporate settings, like they always say, you try to do balance, but there really literally isn't no balance. You either got it or you don't. And I'm like, oof.
And so I'm like, do I have to wear a straight weave, or if I came here with my micro braids, are you going to say something?
Or your nails, like,
or my nails, or like, if my outfit, and I always try to look good. That's just my personality.
Oh, you always dress professionally and cute.
Thank you.
Yes.
But I also feel like sometimes if I dress like a slouch, then I look like a slouch. Like,
yeah.
That, because there's also over masculization or hypersexualization in women. So if I dress sometimes down, they're like, oh, that's that lesbian. Oh, but no.
Like, you can never look bad. It's always, like, and every time you look bad, it's like, are you okay?
Correct. Or like, or that you're not smiling, and so you gotta think about code switching and using when is it appropriate to use AVE or to send a meme, and if everybody's sending memes, like a Friday check-in, I'm like, they're asking what's my favorite movie. I'm throwing Love and Basketball in there, and probably 90% of the people have never even heard of it.
Yeah, that actually.
But I'm still going to be unapologetically Black.
As you should. That actually brings me to a question too, like, totally off record, but like, how do you feel about code switching? Because I feel like sometimes, like, you know, I do it, and then it's kind of hard for me to kind of like turn it off, you know. Like, when do you feel it's appropriate? When do you feel it's appropriate, too, to kind of throw in, like, you know, kind of how you said, like, slang or your culture into it? Because sometimes you'll say, like, or a TikTok sound, or you'll say something like, you know, that's you, and then people are like, wait, what? And then you got to kind of code switch again and go, okay, wait, let me catch myself. When do you know when it's appropriate?
Well, I think of things not as if it's not for them to feel offended, but of like, it's not for you to know.
Yeah.
I'm like, because we see how box braids turn into boxer braids from the Kim Kardashians. And I have always, people coming from like a predominantly African American place. This is my natural accent. Right? I'm not code switching for. I don't use too much slang.
Oops, sorry.
All that. I'm like, I don't use a lot of slang. I don't use like to the extent where I'm like that. It just doesn't feel natural to my tongue because I'm from a northern state. Even though my grandparents were from Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was always doing like, oh, she's trying to sound like a white girl. I do, and I tell my black counterparts because I'm using proper English.
Yeah.
That the math is not mathing. But even saying that reference, if I usually say the math isn't mathing, or like, where's my coin? To people of color, I don't usually say that to people who aren't, because I don't want to have to explain math isn't mathing.
Yeah, because people will be like, what? Is she trying to be smart?
Or like the reference. I find a TikTok of the greens, tomatoes,
Yeah.
turkey. Yeah, because Thanksgiving. And it's like,
oh, okay. Came up with that? That's a nice little jingle.
And so I'm like, you probably don't give me this black thing, but I'm like that. Yeah. That's my Thanksgiving. I loved it ever since with the dances and everything.
Yes,
it's like it's the remix song. Like
literally, that's the theme song for every Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Mhm. And those are some contexts that you don't need to invite everybody to the cookout.
Yeah. And I think I bring that up because, like, I had, this is off worker, but my boyfriend, he told me yesterday I have a hard time turning it off. And that, like, you know, sometimes, like, I'll be kind of still in my, like, very, like, work voice while I'm at home. And then, like, it'll only come out if I'm, like, relaxed. And I'll, like, you know, start to show country twang or something. And it's like, dang, is it really that hard to kind of turn it off once you've, like, started, you know? And I think just because I'm constantly working and constantly going, it's like I just kind of refrain from doing that, because it's like, if I, like, you know, if I say something and someone don't catch it, or if, you know, it's gonna make me feel like, oh, okay, this wasn't the proper time. So,
but I also say don't, or if you're, because when you, and I don't know if your boyfriend is in higher education or not, but yeah, sometimes they're like, okay, you
bring that to home.
Like, no, they're like, you started to speak different because of the higher levels of education. And so sometimes you just outgrow some things. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you just because of the level of education that you get. So don't force something either. Like, that's something that just naturally grows. Like, I have apparently a lot of death, but my grandmother passed away this in the summer, and so I went back home to Michigan. So we were wondering where I was at that week. That's where I was at. Mm-hmm. And one of my old best friends, we had a falling out years ago. Her family was there, and her mom was like, and she never ended up going to college. She got pregnant really young, had like 3 kids. Yeah, it was a lot. Where her baby daddy, who she still ain't married with, it's a lot, right? Mm-hmm. And her mom was like, Khalilah, you look and sound different. I'm like, yeah, from high school, I should have.
You should have done a little growing since then.
I should have done some growing. If I didn't, then that's a problem.
Very much.
So I'm like, this is not the time and place as I'm at a burial to be saying how much I changed, but
yeah,
I should have, and clearly by you saying that, you have not
at all.
But where's my tea? I don't even. This is empty though. And see, that's the reference those the things I would say, and I wouldn't necessarily say
in the office.
In the office. Mm-hmm. So you still keep some of it, but sometimes it's not for everyone.
It's not. Let me see what other. I think I'll ask you 2 more, because I think you've kind of touched up on a couple of these questions, and we kind of made it a combination.
Yeah.
Let me see. So I think I'm gonna make this one my last one, because I think this is a really you really answered these really perfectly, so I appreciate you for this time too. But I want you to,
Yeah, no problem.
what advice would you give for like women that are looking to either grow their own business or grow their own or grow within their company, especially a Black woman, because it is kind of hard to, like I kind of said, the reason why I did this or this article or doing this story is because my mom, she is a CPS worker, social worker of 30 years, and the way she talks about her job and how it took her so long and how hard it was for her to move up the ranks, but she loves what she does, so she just didn't mind it. But for me personally, I would be like, no. But in that setting, it was like the way she explains it, it was hard for her to kind of get there. And so, like, what advice would you give, like, women or Black women that are going into the workforce or their type of field of work, and they start seeing signs like that? What should they do?
So this comes twofold. So I have perspectives on all this. So, one, ask questions. Because if you don't ask, the answer is always no. And if you get an answer that you're not necessarily liking, evaluate that and decide if that's still the place. Now, if you're jumping from, with caveat, because I know sometimes jumping from job to job, sometimes you do have to stick at a place because your question was an unrealistic question based off of because you're like, oh, I want to make $100 million, but I don't do that as an intern. If they say that, they're gonna be like, no. Okay, I quit. Well, no. You have to evaluate. If your question is of like, I've been working here for a while, I've had increased responsibilities. I would like my stuff to be reevaluated, and I'm making lower than I'm supposed to based off the average. I wouldn't hurt to ask a little bit above the hiring, and then I'm willing to do some negotiating, and if they're like, no, this is all we can afford, I still need you to do all this plus more, then you have to realize, like, well, maybe somewhere else may have to be the place that's better suited, and sometimes it does feel hard to leave. However, if you died in a month, they'll have your position up to fill. So take that into consideration too. Like if you're like, I'm working 30 hours extra and I'm only making, and I'm doing a director's position, but I'm only making salary of a first year, and I've been here for 12 years, and people who are coming in who only in here for 1 year, and they're making 5 times as much. I'm using 5 times the exaggeration, even double. But I should either consider moving somewhere else or asking for an increase. And a great example of me asking for something, I was an intern I was undergrad, and I had to do an internship before my student teaching. It was an early childhood, and they was like, okay, Khalilah, we're going to have you working at the child care center at the school. And I was like, okay. Well, I had just finished leaving admissions because I had just became an RA, and I was like, I didn't want to have 2 jobs, especially with the internship. Like, well, I'm not using my work study. I wonder if I just ask them, since I'm already working there, can I just get paid for the internship?
Might as well.
So I went to the director. I was like, hi, I know that you hire a work study. I'm going to be here anyway. And you mind having a job? She was like, no one has ever asked me that before.
Wow. And
she was like, submit your resume because you're going to be here. You have to do a few additional because the difference between the intern, like I would have to be there just a little bit longer, and really it was about like 3 more hours longer, and I was able to actually help feed the kids and stuff. Aww. Which, and which is nothing. Like, there for a couple more hours, and I can get paid for this whole semester instead of doing this for free.
Yeah.
And so I put the rest of May in, and she was like, "Yeah, we can do it. We can do an interview." We did a quick one because she was like, "It's not really coming out of my budget. It's work study." Yeah. And so I got hired, and so now it's a job instead of an internship.
Wow.
All I had to do was ask. And it was a logical question. It wasn't something like
outrageous,
irrational.
Yeah.
Similar thing. My whole reason why I became an RA in the first place was like, I don't think I'll be able to afford housing on this campus if I'm working. If I have to be doing student teaching, maybe I should just apply to be a RA. And it just so happened someone left in the summer. That same racist lady told me as I was walking, "You should apply for the job." Before, and it's so crazy how like God can use your enemies
180
as your footstool. And this was before, so I was like, okay, I'll apply. And everybody else went through this lengthy process. I had one interview, so it was like, Khalilah, you didn't have to do the 3 rounds of interviews and stuff. I was like, no, I just had one 30-minute interview and I got the job.
Okay.
Just, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I was like that. I mean, it works out. It works out. So,
yeah.
And believe that things can work out for you. That I always have that mindset, no matter what, even though in the rough situations. I'm doing this because I know a lot of trauma, and if everything was supposed to be so traumatic in my life for the rest of my life, then what's the purpose of me being here? So I know there's good, and so I believe in the good, and I act and I walk in that believance of good.
I like that. That should be a quote. That's nice. I walk in that really is how like I think sometimes, because it's just you see so much like negativity, or I feel like especially when things get hard or when you don't open your mouth and you just let things sit and settle, it just doesn't do any justice. So by you believing, okay, if I say this, either way it go, there's gonna be some type of positive outcome. So I really like that. Walking is good.
And then at the end of the day, I'm like, what the worst they gonna do? Fire me?
That too.
I've always thought about that in specifically my job. Like, I am a great worker. You fire me because
okay.
I can't just and most of the time I'm always appropriate. Let's be clear. But most time, like if I feel like there's something that needs said, I try to say it, and I'm not gonna be afraid to say it.
As you should.
That's all I got for you. Well, unless you have another question.
Well, I think that's all I got for you too. I think you did such a great job. Thank you, first of all. And I might reach out with a couple more, and we might do a part 2 connection piece, because I really love the answers and just the stories that you told me. But thank you for your time. I really appreciate you.
Welcome. And a word of advice: if you need something, don't wait till the day of. Let me know at least a week in advance.
Okay. I will. Because it's not due till December, so I got a month left. So I'm definitely going to be putting some time on your schedule this month to get it done.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, well, thank you, Khalilah.
You're welcome. Bye. Bye.